question is as follows. Number one, I know it's asur, but I did it anyway. Do I need to remove my tattoo? Number two, does it matter if I was not Jewish at the time? The comparison I was about to make before everyone got excited was, it sounds like temporary insanity. You're familiar with this claim?
Which story?
Yeah.
Temporary insanity.
Yeah.
So I killed someone. I was crazy then. But now I'm fine. now I'm okay. I can be a normal member of society. I only kill people when I'm really angry.
There is something like temporary insanity, no?
In American courts, yes.
But even in Halakhah, I mean, there is something like it's not something like that. That's
correct. But we still hold people accountable for their actions.
Okay.
If you want to get really fancy, then Kabbalistically speaking, you're culpable the moment you evacuate your neshama from your body and cause it to be replaced by Rosh Shtu. In other words, let me give you a material example of this. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I think, there was this, this is a great story. There was a mixed martial arts expert in California.
There was a what?
Mixed martial arts expert in California. He was 22 and he had a trainer who was 25. So what does a mixed martial artist do over the weekend, like to have a good time? So he invites his trainer and two friends to his house, his parents' house really, in California, right? He's from California, so he lives with his parents until he's 50. Because the environmentalist laws make it so hard to purchase and own a home in California. So he lives with his parents weren't home, and they decide, because they're from California, to eat a whole handful of mushrooms, right? Because why not? You know, this is what everyone does on a weekend when they have nothing better to do. So they have these psychedelic mushrooms. They ate apparently several ounces each, which is a lot. And I mean, they're dry, so several ounces is a lot. And so they decided that the mixed martial arts expert was God, and his trainer was the devil, and they were going to have a...
mushroom
which kind of...
I was checking.
No, they're actually... It's a mushroom that's... it's indigenous to North America.
I checked.
These psychedelic mushrooms that they produce a toxin that makes people hallucinate. This is the mushroom's way of saying, don't eat me. That's California's way of saying, where are you? How do I find you? So what happened was that they decided that the mixed martial artist was God, his trainer was the devil, and they were going to have a fight between good and evil over control of the world. So the mixed martial artist killed his trainer.
Oh, wow.
He killed him.
So he was better than the trainer.
Maybe he was better. Maybe Satan didn't pay his bills. I don't know. So he kills his trainer, and he then proceeds to remove his heart, and he puts his heart in the oven.
What?
Right? He puts his heart in the oven, but he forgets it there, and it starts to burn, and it starts to smell. The two other guys realized something was going on. Right? It probably took them some time because they also had mushrooms. And in the end, somebody called the police because it smelled like burning dead people. And when the police came, they see this guy with blood all over him, and this guy is dead, and there's a heart in the oven, and they said, this isn't right. You know. So the guy went to court. Even in the state of California, they got a conviction of 50 years, which is 2 life sentences in California. One of them was for murder, and the other one was for murder with mayhem. Mayhem is an old English word for fantastic violence. Mayhem, like murder with mayhem. So if you kill someone, it's one thing, but if you cut off the head, it's like disgusting, it's repulsive to society. We don't want to see these things. So he got an extra life sentence just for killing him in a very unusual way.
What?
Good question. Probably Hamotzi. Yeah. So temporary insanity. So what does the guy claim? He goes to court and he says, Your Honor, Mr. Ayash, I have to apologize. I was insane when I killed him because I ingested a very large amount of mushrooms. And so the judge responds, well, you probably ingested enough mushrooms to kill a man, but you're still responsible for the decision to lose control over yourself and do something crazy and stupid and deadly and dangerous. So yes, it's possible that you were insane when you did it, but the problem is that you exposed yourself to insanity. You kind of invited it upon yourself. This is the Zohar's explanation of this concept of Adam Hotel and Kenavra Rosh Shtut. Technically, the Gemara says it's true. It's not possible to sin unless you're possessed by some spirit of insanity, a spirit of craziness. But the reality is that you make the conscious choice to invite this
Put
spirit
yourself in the
or to keep it away. We call this Yetzer Hara. And so when your neshama is in control of your body, there's no reason you would sin. And you don't, in fact. And it's only when you chase the neshama away that it's replaced by the void is filled by this ruach shtut, and that's what happens. And you're culpable for this. No matter what you did afterwards, it's your fault because you started this chain reaction of events. So this is the question. So I wasn't Jewish then, but I am now. So when I did it, it was mutar, or at least it was excusable. I was not Jewish. Now that I'm Jewish, do I have to change it? Is it a precondition for becoming Jewish?
I mean,
can I become Jewish if I have a tattoo?
you have to transform your body at some point in order to become Jewish, to put you in the... I mean, you don't have to do Brit Milah, for example, to cut like the actual things when you're not Jewish. When you are Jewish, to do the process, you have to put your body in the like Jewish state.
And
so maybe...
So, no offense to any women here, but what if I'm a woman?
You don't have... I mean, because
I don't
there
have
is
to do anything. I just go to when I come out, I'm Jewish, right?
No, but because there is no difference between like a Jewish body and a woman and a woman. That's why. So
you're saying a prerequisite for becoming Jewish is changing your body. I'm saying no. I'm a woman. I was born a woman.
No, I'm not changing your body. If there are things
I was born Catholic. I want to become Jewish. I don't know why I come out. I'm fine.
What I mean is that if there are things that belong just to a Jewish body, like for women there is no difference. Let's say for men there is Brit Milah, but let's say you put something else which is a tattoo. So you can think like based on this that it would make sense also to put you put your body in a way that makes.
So here's another question, and this question wasn't asked in Perth, Australia. The question was asked actually earlier than this. Is it mutar to bury someone in a Jewish cemetery if they have a tattoo?
Oh, immediately you've been talking about that.
Yeah, so that was my question at the beginning.
So there was an article written in the New York Times a couple of years ago. A very poorly informed and inflammatory article, but that's the New York Times. So the article it had this whole discussion about, whether or not it should be permitted or forbidden. So let's get down to the basics. We're Sephardim. Whenever you have a halachic question, we go to the Tur of the Bet Yosef. That's the first place we go. Normally you find at least if not the answers, you find the roots to the answers there. So yes, it's asur to get yourself tattooed. No, we don't hold there is necessarily an imperative to remove the tattoo. There are a couple of exceptions to the rule. If, for example, the tattoo is idolatrous, okay? And this is very interesting. The article in the New York Times had a lot of chutzpah in the sense that there were people who claimed to be rabbis saying that the only reason the Torah forbids tattoos is in the context of Kedoshim Tihiyu. Parashat Kedoshim talks pretty much, it mentions Shabbat, sexual interdictions, and a few aspects of Avodah Zarah, like the molech, ktovet ka'aka, shaving your head, or growing a blurit. They used to grow the hair in the front. They would grow it long. So is it forbidden for us to tattoo ourselves, or for that matter, to intentionally scar ourselves? Abigail asked me how we remove tattoos later. What if I want to intentionally scar myself? In American prisons, I've never been to an American prison, but I'm told that by the people who've been there, that they will sometimes take, if they get access to hot pieces of metal, they'll use them in order to burn certain signs on their skin. It's like if you can't make a tattoo, at least you can make certain signs. You can scratch yourself in such a way that it causes a scar, and you can spell out things like your girlfriend's name or your boyfriend's name, or whatever it is that makes you happy. So this is also forbidden. We're not allowed to scratch our skin in such a way that it makes scars intentionally. And in the same context, in the same breath, we're not allowed to inject dye or any kind of pigment into our skin that stays there probably permanently and probably midrabanan, potentially even temporarily. So the question is as follows. No, you don't. So yes, it's asur to do it. If you already did it, there's no isur to leave it there. If it's something idolatrous in nature, it probably is a good idea to have it removed. Have it removed how? Let me introduce a halachic concept you may not be aware of, and that is that it's not so simple to permit surgery or medical interventions that cause damage for the purpose of doing good. What do I mean? We have a biblical interdiction of what's called a hovel b'havero. You cannot intentionally cause someone to bleed. You can't intentionally cause someone a bruise. It's not the kind of thing that that the Torah condones, period. Very interesting question, by the way. Halachically, not that anybody cares, but halachically speaking, is it mutar for me to compete in martial arts, karate, boxing, etc., if it's inevitable that I have to beat up some other guy, and what if he's Jewish? So is it mutar for him is it his mitzvah to forgive? can he say, I know the Torah says you can't do this, but I agree you should hit me because I want to hit you too, and that's part of the competition. That sounds very Greek. This is not Jewish culture. So is it my body? Is it for me to forgive you? Do I have the right to forgive you for doing something the Torah says it's asur to do anyway? Is it do I have the power to do this? When it comes to damaging yourself, there's a question as to how or why this would be permissible. In other words, is it possible that I might need surgery in order for a life-saving surgery? Let's say, I need a brain surgery. So cut open your head, take out a defective part of the brain. So if that's the case, then in the process of removing the defective part of the brain, they're going to have to cut the skin, they'll have to cut the bone, they have to put it back together, it leaves a scar. Here you would say, okay, so you're doing this for some beneficial purpose. So it looks bad now, but it's going to heal, and when I heal, I'll be better than I was before. So the question is it mutar for us to harm ourselves physically or someone else's body for purely aesthetic reasons? Another Greek question, right? For purely aesthetic reasons. How's the halachic question asked? If you want to look in halakha and see where this comes up, a girl who asks if she's allowed to have plastic surgery in order to make it easier to find a shidduch, right? Because there is no greater indicator.
Want to keep it.
Right. There's no better indicator of a woman's success as a mother or as a wife than the size of her nose. Clearly, if she has a big nose, she'll be a terrible mother. She'll be an awful housewife. She'll be an outcast in society.
There are some examples of it.
Right. said the Italian who works in fashion. Please, David, enlighten me. Do you have a tattoo to that effect? Is there a picture?
I wish.
Yeah. So is it permissible for us to mutilate our bodies in order to make ourselves potentially, anyway, more appealing or more attractive in the eyes of other people? Does every plastic surgery succeed? Does everyone who has plastic surgery come out looking better than they did before?
Often psychologically.
Oh, so is it permissible for me to mutilate my body in order to make my psychology happy?
I don't know, but it's
Good question. Good question. So Rav Ovadia Yosef takes a very lenient opinion, a lenient approach when it comes to mutilation of the body for the purpose of making it look better, where he says that a woman who believes that her physical appearance is the reason why she's not successful in her shidduch. My experience with dating websites corroborates this. Again, all the greatest tzaddikim in the world, when they have to give a reason why they decline a shidduch, 999 out of 1,000, it's not my physical look. So a woman who suffers from not my physical look feels the need to correct something about herself, because clearly society has taught her either you're pretty or you're not, and if you're not pretty, then you're worthless as a woman. As a man, at least you can be successful at work, and someone will consider you, worth something. A woman, it's always reduced to how good she looks, and if not, then she's just useless to society.
She cooks also. She cooks it.
If she wears a mask. Yeah, she cooks and she wears a mask. That way no one's offended by her nose. Well, this is pretty terrible. So the question becomes, under what circumstances we permit. So Rav Ovadia has to explain it. He says, look, if Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked this question too, if she wants to get married and procreate, and we're talking about biblical mitzvot, and the mitzvah to not to mutilate yourself or to harm yourself or anyone else in such a way, it is a biblical mitzvah. The question is, do we permit it with someone's permission? Okay, and we hold leniently, because it's not so clear from the Rambam exactly how he words this, we hold leniently that it is permissible for me to allow my body to be temporarily harmed or mutilated in order to make it a little bit more aesthetically appealing. On these grounds, the poskim came to the conclusion that if I have a tattoo that embarrasses me, imagine that. Have you ever seen a tattoo that's embarrassing? So you were drunk, you went to a tattoo parlor, and you said, this tattoo will be cool forever.
I see the same.
No one's ever going to forget this musician or that actress. This symbol will never die. This will remain fashionable for the rest of eternity. So you get a tattoo, and the next day you feel stupid, and you want to have it removed. Well, if the tattoo is embarrassing to you, then the poskim reluctantly agree that there might be grounds for correcting the situation. The question is how. And so, thanks, I had to sample something. I did catch the email, but I had to eat something. I don't regret it either, just so you know, for the record. So the poskim agree that it's possible to have the tattoo removed if it's something you're embarrassed about, either because it's a stupid tattoo or it's the name of someone that you don't like anymore. Which is really great advice to those of us looking to get tattoos. Make sure you really, really like the person whose name you're getting tattooed on you, because tattoos are pretty much forever.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, and he's rubbing his left arm.
Oh, yeah. No, that's not.
So
Just no people.
right. So the advice given is yes, you can have it removed if it's embarrassing to you. Maybe it's embarrassing to you because of the content or because of the shape. If it's avodah zarah, we're even more lenient, and I'll explain what I mean by lenient in a second. Or if it's just embarrassing to you because now you want to live amongst observant Jews that aren't really crazy about tattoos. I remember my brother told me when he was in Israel, he went for a year after high school, and he went through a very Haredi kick. So he said they took them, they wanted to inspire the guy, took them to the mikveh of the Arizal in Tzfat, right? The water is 400 degrees below 0 Celsius. It is freezing cold. It's basically snow that melts and only doesn't freeze because it's moving. So so he goes to the mikveh and he said all of a sudden everybody said they see this 3 buses pull up and they realize that the place is about to get mobbed, so they go, they jump in, they jump out. And he said he sees these 3 buses of Breslover Hasidim, no offense, Shlomo, Breslover Hasidim getting out of the bus. And they're like, wow, look at that. These guys came from a distance just to go to the mikveh of the Arizal. And they got these massive beards, they have these long peot, they have these massive kippot, their heads are all shaved, they've got, peot down to their knees. And all of a sudden, these guys start taking off their clothes, and he sees eagles and dragons and falcons and scorpions. And one guy's got a snake all the way around his arms. So apparently this was a bust of relatively recent Breslover Hasidim. Guys who missed the first few years of elementary school, and they were in the process of becoming a little bit more observant. But we don't consider the tattoos to be a hatzitza in the mikveh. If it's a barrier between you and the water, it's a problem. We don't tend to hold this way. But because getting rid of the tattoo, unless it's really avodah zarah, think a cross, we would recommend that you do this with a laser and not having it surgically removed. So a little bit of background and some anatomy in the process. Klaf in Hebrew comes from what etymological root? Kuf lamed fe in Hebrew means what? As a verb. Lekalef, for example, huh? Lekalef means to peel in Hebrew, to peel something. So why do we call it klaf? We call it klaf because it's peeled not off the body of the animal, but it's actually the different layers of the skin are then split. If you go to places that sell, for example, construction supplies, you can buy split cowhide gloves. Split cowhide means the skin of the cow is very thick, and they split it in half. Makes it easier for gloves, for dexterity. It's much easier to work with split cowhide. So we call it klaf. What's the klaf? The klaf is the skin that's removed from the animal, and the skin has several layers, 3 in kind of macro picture. It's more than that. But on the very outside layer, you have the layer that actually holds the roots of the hairs. There's some pigmentation. Sometimes you find animals that have brown skin, people have birthmarks, etc. Under this layer, you have so that's the dermis, hypodermis, then you have the subcutaneous layer of fat. And it's right at the bottom of that, the middle layer that is the ideal for writing. When we make parchment, this is the layer that you want to expose because it's got very, very dense coils of collagen. And collagen, basically what this does, you think when you're writing on paper that you're writing on something very smooth. Have you ever tried to write on glass? With a pen, for example? On glass. It's very, very hard to do because it's very smooth. It doesn't absorb the ink. It doesn't hold it. Paper actually is rough, and it's the roughness. It's these loose fibers at the end. They call this the tooth in chemistry. Like how much does it bite? So this is what actually holds the ink. When you're writing a Sefer Torah, if the klaf is too smooth, the ink spreads. When you have these little hairs, they kind of hold the ink in place, and the ink dries, and it stays thick, and it gives you a shiny letter. So when they make tattoos, and this has been for thousands of years, they knew this, you can't just draw a picture on someone's skin because it'll eventually rub off. This is a dead layer of skin, and so these cells get replaced very quickly. What you need to do is you need to inject some kind of a pigment, some kind of a dye. The primitive tattoos, it was one color. You found some kind of dye, And you would basically take a sharp, either a toothpick or a needle or something, and you would dip it in the dye, poke it into the skin, and you'd be pigmenting, you'd be coloring the layer under the skin, and that's where it stays pretty much permanent because that layer doesn't change very much. So the old school method of removing tattoos was basically surgery. It would mean removing the outside layer of the skin, removing the second layer under it, and scraping off a little bit of the fat. Sometimes it even touches the muscle fibers themselves. And they would cut away at some of this in order to, yeah, it's not so pleasant. I know it sounded like a great idea, Manuele. It's not so pleasant. It helps to be drunk. It's semi-anesthetic anyway, an antiseptic. So the process of removing a tattoo involves painful surgery, where they would basically cut out, a certain portion of the skin and the layers that are under it, and they would graft something else on from a skin from a different part of the body. More often than not, it's the rear end. For some reason, the skin regenerates quickly. It's because people's weights fluctuate and the skin is accommodating. So that's relatively painful. It's also much more intrusive. And because we said that really it's not so simple, you have to have some kind of a justification in order to bruise or cut someone's body, even your own. We tend not to like that particular method. So you actually find poskim who'll tell you it's better that you shouldn't remove the tattoo because it involves suspending the isur midoraita chovel b'chavero, the interdiction of causing bleeding and damage. Even if the ultimate goal is positive, it's better to do it in such a way that it doesn't cause damage. The alternative, although it's 5 times more expensive, believe it or not, is the laser surgery, where the laser basically burns through the skin and destroys the layer of tissue that holds the collagen, that holds the pigment in place. What happens is the skin regenerates, and you see what you'll see is probably more scar tissue than anything else. Mm-hmm. But at least it doesn't have color, it doesn't have quite as much contrast. You can sometimes do this in layers, or they'll have it over a period of time. So you'll have one laser treatment, and they'll have another one a few months later, in order to basically erase whatever's left of it. Yeah, it's a silly decision on the spot that can cost you lots and lots of painful surgeries. But the poskim prefer this particular method because it doesn't really involve damaging the skin. Doesn't really involve cutting anything away or causing bleeding or bruising or permanent or long-term damage. The advisability of getting laser surgery, if you're exposed to a lot of it over a long period of time, might not be such a great thing as far as your exposure to radiation, but usually this is relatively short treatment. So
it's preferable, the laser is preferable to the...
All the poskim agree that the laser is preferable to the surgery.
To the surgery, but
it's
also preferable...
Halakhically speaking, it's preferable to surgically removing it. It's a lot more expensive.
No, okay, but...
And therefore, a lot of the poskim agreed that probably, if you can't afford laser surgery, you're better off leaving it where it is, unless it's something disrespectful or idolatrous, in which case, at least during tefillah, it should be covered. So if I go to pray and there's a picture, ask me why, construction worker has like a...
So if you can't afford
laser, dressed woman on his arm, so it's probably appropriate that he should cover it at least during tefillah or the Beit Knesset. But then covering it becomes a problem. What happens if he has this picture of a woman that he used to like on his left arm, and he has to put on tefillin, so he can't cover it and put the tefillin on top of the cover because it's creating a chatzitza. So it's a complicated.
In Israel now, like there is a new fashion. They all have like all the Tehillim tattoo, the name of God tattoo. Yeah, like even like the name of God, like explicitly. So is that an issue? I mean, sure. Like you go.
Erasing the.
You go. No, not erasing the name of God.
I thought you were going to say that.
No, but you go to the restroom with like the Sefer Torah on your body.
Right. So it becomes a source to take a shower, is what you're saying.
No, but like I mean, is it at some point it's not recommended to take some stuff?
It's a good question. In order for that to be, look, is it permissible to erase a digital file that has the name of Hashem in it? I get an email that happens to have Perek of Tehillim, like sometimes a weekly Parashat Shuvah email, and I'll have a Perek of Tehillim with the name of Hashem spelled out. Is it mutar to archive it, to delete it? Can I turn off my computer if it's there? Like I took it off the screen. So we tend to hold that what's asur for us to erase is what's written on the klaf, the way writing is usually done. So if it's written in a temporary way, it may not necessarily count. But wait a second, because Andrea's going to tell you, hang on a minute, tattoos are pretty much permanent, right? This is, like I said, writing. Not only that, the background that I gave you on klaf is pretty appropriate, because writing on parchment is pretty permanent. Paper tends to fade with time. Parchment is much better at retaining color and retaining the ink. So it is pretty much permanent. It's a good question. There's a solution to this. The solution would be the old school surgical method. And this is something you can only do with really good parchment. Sometimes when you make a mistake on parchment, well, there are two methods of fixing it, right? More or less parallel to removing a tattoo. You can take a knife with a kind of rounded edge to it, and you can scratch off the word or the letters, the lines that were incorrect. So on a Sefer Torah, you're allowed to write out of order. You can write from the end to the beginning to the end. You're writing sheets, you have to stitch them together anyway. So if I write, and I make a mistake, I skipped a line or wrote a line twice, I can sit there scratch something out, right? So you have two words in limchok. In Hebrew means to erase, but the etymology implies removal of something. Mimachek, for example. I don't know how well you guys know Halakhah Shabbat. You ever see that book with the 39 malachot in it? So there's a malacha called... Okay, there's a really great illustrated children's book that has good explanation. It's very Ashkenazi because a lot of things that aren't necessarily asur, but let's assume they are for argument's sake. So there's a malacha called mimachek, right? There are 10 malachot that have to do with wheat, with planting wheat and grinding and sifting and separating the wheat from the chaff, kneading and baking bread. And there are several malachot. The next category that wins as far as the sheer number of the 39 that it represents is the production of leather, right? The production of leather or parchment. How do you do it? So you take the skin off the animal, and the first step of making really good leather is removing, it's called the memachek. It's where you take off any leftover membranes or fat or muscles that are stuck to the skin because they putrefy very quickly. You then have to salt it, right? You put salt on the skin, it helps to remove some of the blood or the things that you don't need inside it. And once it's salted, it'll last pretty much forever, and then you can tan it. You can put it in some kind of a solution, something ionic, either very acid or very base. It'll eventually collapse the collagen fibers, it'll make a stiffer skin, and you can stretch this out, make really good leather or parchment out of it. So mimachek is where you're removing these layers. This is why there's certain things. This is why some of the poskim wanted to forbid using solid soap on Shabbat, because what you're doing is you're like removing layers of it, and it would be analogous to scraping the fat and muscle off of the skin when you take it off in order to make leather out of it. Anyway, so mechika in Hebrew means this. It's like you're removing a layer, so I can take a knife and I can scratch the letters off of the parchment. The other way to do this, and they sometimes call this ligror, like to scrape or to scratch. The other way of doing this, and this is mighty delicate, but what happens if I made a mistake with the name of Hashem? I'm sitting there writing a Sefer Torah, I get a phone call or a text message, all of a sudden, boom, I touch two letters in the name of Hashem. So it's a surah to erase the name of Hashem, right? We learn this, the Gemara says we learn it from the Isur to destroy anything, the Mizbeach or anything related to Beit HaMikdash. You have to destroy the places the non-Jews worship their Avodah Zarah in. And you're not allowed to do this to Hashem. So we understand we can't do this literally to the name of Hashem. It can't be erased. So how do you remove it? I have a beautiful Sefer Torah waiting to be stitched together. And one of the sheets, I wrote the name of Hashem twice. Where I wrote it wrong, or the letters touch, or they're too far apart, etc. So what do? With a very flexible razor blade, it's possible to just shave off the outermost layer of the kalaf. In other words, I'll just shave off the name of Hashem. This is very delicate. There are guys, by the way, who make a living doing this in Israel. They're not even sufrim. They're really good with razor blades. They just take razor blades and they take the name of Hashem off in one whole piece without taking off too much or too little, without leaving, cutting into the name of Hashem. And the guy can save you a sheet of parchment that costs between $55 and $80 and probably 4 days of work, which is even more expensive than that. And you pay him whatever you pay him. He does this for a living. So you can remove the name of Hashem if you take it off in its entirety, basically. So some imbecile...
You have to put it in Geniza, basically.
Well, I mean, you'll bury it and it'll decompose like anything you put in Geniza anyway. So, very good questions. Otniel is sweating. It might cost you a lot of money, man, but you
No,
know.
you don't.
Right,
You
the right
don't put
thing
the
to
name
do.
of God. You don't put
Right,
the-
you just put a kuf instead of the hey.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, you are.
So this is what we would recommend. In other words, if you have to take off the name of Hashem, the only option you would have would be the surgery, where basically you remove the thing whole. This way, you didn't erase the name of Hashem. You just picked it up and put it somewhere else. Not especially pleasant, but then it doesn't leave a scar in the name of Hashem, which you could also make the same case. You say, no, you moved it with laser, so what do you have? You have a scar, a beautiful yod, a beautiful hey, beautiful wow. Didn't necessarily solve any of the problems. So
sorry, back to the question to the tattoos.
Yeah.
You said if you okay, the laser is better than the surgery, and if you can afford the laser, you said it's better to do that or not to do armor yours. So the laser is better than surgery.
laser is better than surgery.
And if
because
you
it doesn't
can
do as much
if you can afford laser, it's better to do that, or it's better not to
it depends.
cause
Why.
harm on
It
your.
seems like the conclusion of the poskim is that even if it is avodah zarah, it doesn't necessarily have to be removed. So if you have, here's another question, by the way. The Bet Yosef was asked this question. Remember, he was born in Spain, the 15th century, and Spain at the time was the majority was Catholic, but they were ruled by Muslims. They were probably the minority, but they had more power. Sounds a lot like today. And what happened was that you had a lot of Jews that traded in diamonds and jewelry, etc. And the question was asked in Halakhah Tattoos, is it mutar for a Jew to sell crosses to non-Jews?
You go back.
So, right, Dawid's laughing because...
Yeah, Rome is
Roma is
of
full.
course, Rome is full of that.
Like
Right.
all the guys who sell the
Christian
small
things.
statue, the Christian, of the souvenirs.
Yeah. Okay.
They're all Jews.
Yeah.
It's a market.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
They control
Classic,
the market.
right? You worship whatever you want, we'll sell you the merchandise, that's all. I'm not involved. So the question is it asur or is it mutar for us to do this? So the Bet Yosef writes, this is 500 years ago, more than 500 years ago. He writes that it's mutar for Jews to buy and sell. Specifically, he says crosses. He's not talking about every form like the Buddha or that fat elephant statue with 8 arms. I don't know what the hell that is. But no offense to anyone who worships the fat elephant statue with 8 arms. If there are any among us, my apologies. So he writes that the cross, in his estimation, was no longer avodah zarah per se. It wasn't that people pray to the cross and expect the cross to do things for them, but rather he called it like a zecher dvarim ba'alma. It's like a souvenir. It reminds you of something supposed to make a connection or association, but it's not necessarily avodah zarah in the sense that people wear it as a symbol, they wear it as a sign. They don't actually wear it as a deity or as a religious relic per se. Proof is, for example, people with crosses go to the bathroom, they take showers, no one feels, they don't even think twice about it, it's not a big deal. They have it all over the flags of half the countries in Europe, even though God only knows Scandinavia is not a very religious place, but they have these crosses on their flags nonetheless. Switzerland, I don't think, is exceptionally observant either, not since the Calvinists, but they have it on their flags. So what if I want to buy a Swiss Army knife that happens to have a cross on it? So I'm not necessarily buying it as merchandise for the purpose of selling it, but the reality is that it's there. I'm purchasing it. So if you can remove it, it's nice to remove it. If you can't, then you rely on the Bet Yosef saying, no one sells these knives to make you worship Jesus. It's just a symbol of the military of the country for which they developed these knives, and so it's there. So if someone happens to have a tattoo that has a cross on it, if it's in the shape of avodah zarah, but it's not used for that purpose, that's one thing. If it's mamash, like you expect people to bow down to you and pray to you because of the symbol, then you belong in politics. So don't know, what else he's referring to. He says if it's in the shape of avodah zarah, I don't think anybody actually worships anybody's physical body today. But he says even so, the majority of the poskim didn't require it to be removed. They just required it to be covered during tefillah. You can't leave that exposed during tefillah, but rest more peacefully if you thought you had to have your tattoos removed up until now. The reality is probably not. If you'd like to, though, you should know that there's an interesting halachic question as to the permissibility of removing it and how you do this. In some cases, it's probably better not even doing it at all, but if you can afford laser, that seems to be the preferred method of it. So any personal questions, feel free to text me pictures.
Did you ask at the beginning for the martial arts. So you can do boxing, for example, or it's
Yeah.
issue with Apollo.
Good question. So there's the sugya is very complicated amongst the Rishonim. Am I allowed to permit someone to do something to me that would cause me bruises or bleeding? And the question is, if so, is it only permissible for some perceived gain? And how significant does the gain have to be? So if, again, I'm a not very attractive looking woman and I want better chances of finding a really spiritual guy, right? So I'm going to fix my nose and my cheeks and my chin. Your goal is ultimately to find a shidduch, and it should facilitate the observance of mitzvot. So we permit, we're pretty flexible with this. If you're doing it, let's say a girl who's already married, Stam wants to feel better for herself, or she wants to be more appealing for the doorman or the mailman. So here it's already, she's already married, she's already performing the mitzvot. The question is, what's the psychological gain that she's after? Am I permitted to do something that doesn't even improve my aesthetic appearance or doesn't bring me any physical gains? Maybe I'm doing it because I have a chance of winning money. So I don't know if you're familiar with the American Boxing Federation, but these fights, Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield, the heavyweight fighters, the loser got like $25 million just for showing up. Just for showing up, you get beat up over the course of what's at the end of the day 2 minutes, maybe 3, and you get 25. Like you could retire off of this money. So
More like a hobby, like on the daily or twice. I mean, let's say twice a week. And for sure, you will get at some point you get hurt, and for some you bled, and for sure there.
Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult. So if you make the argument, for example, that sparring this way would be a way of maintaining your physical health.
Yeah, but you could do it running. I mean, that's true, but you could do like plenty of things. I'm just like.
If you're looking for potential benefits, so it can
If you
keep
like
you
it,
physically
you
active.
like it,
you enjoy it.
You enjoy getting hit in the head.
No.
No, he thinks the other guy.
Come play hockey.
Hitting the other one.
No, but hockey same, huh?
Yeah, no,
If
this is true. So but it's a little bit different. Hockey is a contact sport, but the goal of the game is not necessarily to the goal of the game is to score goals and not to be scored on. If you're knocking a guy out in order to prevent him from scoring, it's one thing. If you go into the game just to hit someone and break his teeth, I mean, there are guys like this, and they make a lot of money, more than me. I don't know. So the question, it becomes a lot more difficult to justify at this point. I think the reality is that no one ever asked the question. I've never seen the poskim talk about it. Is it mutar to about? Probably they'll tell you, of course not. It's crazy. Why would you do such a thing? It's the people who go into it just don't ask. It's like a tattoo question. It's like, I'm not asking Rabbi if I can get a tattoo.
No, but I never thought of asking something like this because I never thought about it. But
so who thinks? Okay, who thought of asking the question? Is it okay for me to be a spy and have sexual relations with a Jewish guy? Right. I mean, the question came up.
Also, I didn't ask about this.
But now that you found out about it, you're curious.
I have to.
It's we call this a career change.
Yeah.
So these are interesting questions. I don't know that the physical fitness is necessarily a good argument. The Brazilians have something similar to this. It's like a form of workout that's based on martial arts.
It's capoeira.
Yeah, but there is no physical.
No contact.
No.
Because they're not doing it right. Okay, but that's one aspect of it. The other is maybe making money. If I can do this and make money out of it, is that considered enough of a benefit? I could say, look, I'm not just mutilating myself because I knew, weird story. When I was in college, I met a girl who had a roommate that used to had weird obsessive compulsive behaviors, and she would mutilate herself. So it started with her like pulling out hairs. So she pulled out all of her eyebrows, not just like to make them, like just remove them altogether. And then she would pull out hairs from her head. These are weird things. So people do mutilate themselves for no apparent gain. And that would be much more difficult to explain. But often speaking, it's just a soul to do things like this. If making money would be considered enough of a potential gain or justification, you could say, look, I wouldn't normally allow myself to be beat up, but even if I lose, even if I do get beat up, I get $20 million, and if I beat the other guy up even better, I get even more money. So it's not mutilating yourself for absolutely no reason. It's mutilating yourself for 25 million reasons. I don't know that holds water.
You give 2.5 million master. I'm sure I can tell you post
It's
scheme to
not
give you the
right.
authorization. Yeah.
So just to
We can, but there are celebrities that like you raise money to have a tattoo removed for a charity or something.
Mm.
There are things like that. Or you get a tattoo or have one removed.
Just to conclude on the tattoo,
Yeah.
because you said at the beginning with and
J'ai vraiment cassé toi.
the burial also.
J'ai cassé les-
Because you said you can't. It's okay. It's not to remove the tattoo because you cause harm to yourself,
Mhm.
so you can keep it. But then what the question about a person who's dead? So if you do you have to remove the tattoo from the body before burial or
Oh,
not?
so back to the New York Times article. The New York Times was trying to, in a very inflammatory, sensationalist, very loosely, factually based story, which is basically what the New York Times front page is all about. They were trying to make a whole scandal about how in antiquity tattoos were forbidden because of Avodah Zarah, and today, although the religion doesn't really recommend it, do you actually have to have them removed? And so the answer is no. And there's a whole scandal. Do you have to remove them before being buried in a Jewish cemetery?
Yeah, that's what.
Here it could be that the origin of the confusion was really tattoos based on Avodah Zarah. You had, for example, the classic example of this is the Ethiopians in Israel. The Ethiopians, a lot of them, especially the Falashmura. By the way, the Falashmura, just FYI, in case you're interested in investigating a little bit more deeply, this is a community that the greater Jewish community rejected in Ethiopia. In other words, this is exactly what happened in Spain. The Beit Yosef writes about he left Spain when they gave them an ultimatum of be baptized or leave. So he left. And he lived to see two generations later, two subsequent generations. The Beit Yosef himself writes that if someone comes to you from Spain and tells you, I'm Jewish, but they have no proof of their identity, we don't have a ketubah or anything, he says they should convert. They should convert as a humrah. So what happened was that the Jews who left Spain and then were reunited with the what they called the Marranos, the Jews who stuck it out, who pretended pro forma or not to be Catholic, he says anyway they should convert, l'humrah, let them go to the mikveh and renounce Avodah Zarah. So the Ethiopian Jews, there was a whole machloket about the Falashmura in the late 80s, early 90s as to whether or not they should be brought to Israel. This was a group of Ethiopians who, under duress, under pressure, had converted to Christianity. I believe, if it's the Coptic Church, or if they're Catholics, anyway, they converted to a form of Christianity. And as a demonstration of their faith, you have a lot of these tribal markings in Africa. So all of the Falashmura, without exception, this is men, women, and children, have a cross tattooed right in the middle of their forehead. And that is something that first and foremost, the Ethiopian Jewish community found very offensive, because there were people who were tortured and killed because they were Jewish, and who nevertheless refused to convert to Christianity, even pro forma. And so, anyway, long story short was that they did accept the Falashmura against the protests of the Ethiopian Jewish community. I have to point that out. Not the Ethiopians are saying, here's another group of Jews from Ethiopia, bring them with us. They were saying, no, these people had converted, it was already several generations ago, and they claimed they had intermarried, and it was very difficult to tell the difference between them and the Goyim. But you have these crosses. So, that's a whole other story. When it comes to burial, the guiding principle in burial is kavod hamet, kavod haniftar. We try to do whatever we can in order to maintain the dignity of the deceased. To show you how funny this is, maintaining the dignity of the deceased in antiquity meant burying them as soon as humanly possible. So if I found out, Bar Minan, that one of my 7 relatives had passed away, not later, not tonight, not tomorrow, now, we'll conduct a funeral. In fact, in Yerushalayim, they still to this day do funerals at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Someone passed away, let's bury them now. You want to come to the Shiva. We'll be sitting, you'll have plenty of time, take a bus, take a train, whenever you get here is good. So, that was considered kavod haniftar back in the day when they had no refrigeration. Today, if someone says, I know family, the mother passed away, let's go ASAP to the Chevra Kadisha and have the tahara taken care of. Nope. We're going to wait for the relative from LA to show up in Israel 2 days later because of the connecting flights. So the question is this actually considered kavod haniftar? If we aren't concerned for the rapid decomposition of the body, so the appearance and the smell, etc., aren't going to be radically changed if the people are, the deceased is held in refrigeration, does kibud haniftar then become having as many people there as possible, or at least the close relatives, or the children, or the aunts, the uncles, the cousins? You have to draw the line somewhere, but it's a very tricky concept, because what's kavod for one person is a disgrace to someone else.
So it can be that, like, removing the tattoo from a dead person, you're causing him. I mean, you're changing. Yeah, you're doing something to that body, which is not honoring the dead body.
Maybe it is.
And on the other hand, you can say that
you know,
it is,
when you were little, you were baptized against your will or willingly, whatever. But if I suspect that you're Jewish and we hold this sign to be a disgrace, in fact it's a reminder of the fact that your family capitulated to the pressure and converted, even made believe, you know, to convert to Avodah Zarah. Maybe the honorable thing to do is to remove it.
Yeah, what was it?
So again, if it was
So
a picture of a guy or a girl or some motto or whatever, it's one thing. But so Mamash Avodah Zarah, there probably is a pretty good reason to believe we should remove it. I think what happened was that, and this isn't the first time that happened, I think it just came out in such a way, people made a big scandal about it. I don't know for a fact that the Rabbanut in Israel takes off these tattoos. If I remember correctly, they don't. They don't. And the thing about getting tattooed on your forehead is they even have it removed, even with a laser, it's still somewhat visible. It's not exactly like if you have a scar in the shape of a Coptic cross on your forehead. It doesn't look very different from the cross itself. In fact, the cross probably looks a little bit better than the scar does. So you have these messy situations. If someone's alive and they want to remove it, here we said that although they might not be required to make hadin, you know, the bottom line of the halakha, they're certainly welcome to, if it's embarrassing to them, and really hopefully it should be, after someone passes away, you know, it's a good question. It's a good question. If they would be attacked for doing this in Ethiopia because it would be showing that they don't really accept Christianity, you can easily make the case to leave it on, because when you're alive you don't have to remove it necessarily. If it's a matter of being embarrassed about it, then hopefully in Israel they are embarrassed about it, they stop doing it, so maybe removing it would be an honorable, respectable thing. You know, but it's expensive, it costs more money, it delays the burial a little bit. Don't know. But I don't think as a policy the Rabbanut expects people to do this. I think if the family requests it, they will. I want to double check on that because I've never buried an Ethiopian, but I'd know who to ask. Yeah.